Hey, welcome back everyone to another broadcast of In the Trenches. I'm your host, Tom Morkis, and today I sit down with Nathan Hirsch, the founder of FreeUp, a leading marketplace for pre-vetted virtual assistants in e-commerce and digital marketing, a company which he acquired for $5,000, grew to $5 million per year in sales, and which he recently sold. And in today's interview, we go behind the scenes of what that process was like. What was the spark behind purchasing or acquiring FreeUp? What did he invest in to grow it? How he then positioned it to sell. And he did this in about 4 years. And so it's a pretty remarkable effort. And I guess there's a lot of things you can extract from this, and we touch on a lot of different subjects. But one thing that resonated with me throughout was listening to how Nathan was effectively always finding some new source of leads, of traffic, of whatever it was he was doing. He was really focused on it, and he made it happen. He'd find these opportunities and he'd exploit them. And they compounded over time. It's the same experience I've had in my own businesses. It's the same experience I hear from a lot of the people I interview on this podcast and from my friends who have had and built very successful businesses that they've either continued to maintain or sold. And so just this idea of constant growth, constant iteration, constant improvement, and not being slowed down by things like, oh, at the start, it was a manual process. In fact, almost the entire process was manual. From how he would, from the client side, the user side, to the freelancer side. So because FreeUp is a marketplace, you can imagine how painful a manual process there would be. But that's how he started, and he bootstrapped it and then started to invest in the software piece of it and was able to then sell it in about a 4-year time span. The other thing that I think is kind of remarkable is just when you focus on the customer experience, all the other things start to fall in place around your business. Like the things that should be updated, the things they should focus on, where they should put their effort. If you make the users and the customers happy, then you're going to build a business that eventually somebody wants. So lots of things to take away from today's conversation, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you do, make sure, remember, leave a review. Go to tommorkis.com/iTunes. That's TOMMORKES.com/iTunes, and that'll take you right to iTunes to leave a review. Or if you're listening to this in a podcasting app, pause, stop what you're doing, leave a 5-star review right now. Pull the car over, pause, leave a review. Okay, maybe not that, but wait till you're parked and then go ahead and leave a review. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your guys' support and helping us spread the word. It really means a lot. All right, without further ado, let's get to today's conversation. So Nathan, the place I want to start with is a little bit of your backstory. I want to get into the sale of FreeUp and how you kind of organize that. But before that was even a thing, before that happened, there was obviously a spark that led to the acquisition of this, your investment and growth in it to build it. So take us back to about there, or maybe even before, like what led you into entrepreneurship and then getting into FreeUp in the first place.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. So going back even before FreeUp, I mean, growing up, my parents were both teachers, and I grew up with the mentality that I was going to go to school, get a real job, work for 30 years and retire. And I did go to college. I went to Quinnipiac University, and it was there that I really had some jobs, like summer jobs going into college. And I had already kind of figured out I hated having a boss. And the question became like, can I start a business before I graduate? Because if I was going to graduate with a degree, I was probably going to go out and get a real job. And I kind of looked at college as a ticking clock. I had 4 years to figure out if I could be an entrepreneur. So I started off buying and selling people's textbooks, competing with my school bookstore who was ripping people off. And I gave people higher prices. I would sell them to online distributors. Came across Amazon doing that. And one day I got a cease and desist letter from my college telling me to knock it off because I was competing with their bookstore. And I freaked out a little bit. I didn't want to get kicked out of college. My parents were teachers, so that wouldn't have gone over too well. And so I pivoted pretty hard. And I had sold some of these books on Amazon, and I thought it was cool that I could have this 24/7 storefront and ship products and get direct deposits. All this was pretty new. It was 2008, 2009. So I started doing a lot of experimenting with all sorts of different products, stuff I was familiar with, like sporting equipment, video games, computers, and I just failed over and over. And it wasn't until I branched really out of my comfort zone and found the baby product industry that sales started to take off, and I started to make real money. And before I knew it, I was selling hundreds of thousands, eventually millions of dollars of baby products out of my college dorm room, drop shipping them from different US manufacturers. And as I was growing this business, I became quickly overwhelmed. I was working 20 hours a day. My I was balancing being in a fraternity and schoolwork and friends and everything that kind of went along with being in college. And I realized I had to start hiring people. So I started hiring college kids, which was a disaster on, on a lot of fronts. They were very unreliable and didn't do a lot to help my business. Besides my one really good hire, who was one of my first hires, named Connor, and he's actually been my business partner for 10 plus years. But we learned a valuable lesson together about not hiring college kids for important roles in your company. And based on a necessity, we couldn't really get adults to work for us as 20-year-old Amazon sellers. So we went into the remote hiring world, the Upworks, the Fivers, and we hired some really good VAs to start, but we hated the process. We hated posting a job, getting 100 applicants, interviewing them one by one. It took forever. It did help us create our own hiring process, which we've kind of applied to all our businesses going forward. But we wanted something better and faster. And we kept looking. And when we couldn't find it, we said, you know what, we'll build it ourselves. And that's when the idea of FreeUp came about. We really built the marketplace that we wish we had from the client side, from the hiring side, a platform that already pre-vetted VAs, freelancers before they even got on the platform, that me as a client could put in a request and get someone matched up same day and just get started right away, knowing this person was already vetted. Great 24/7 support on the back end in case anything went wrong. If the freelancer or the VA didn't show up or missed a deadline, I could go right to the marketplace. And on the back end, and no turnover protection. If someone quits, covering replacement costs and getting a new person right away, because turnover just kills businesses. So that was a concept, and we launched it. We launched it to Amazon sellers. We were fortunate enough that people really liked it. We had taken $5,000 and built this really crummy software that did very little. The freelancers could log in and the clients could log in and see their freelancers. And that was it. Everything else was manual. People would have to email me requests and Skype me and call me. And so over time, we started to invest more and more in the software. And I'll kind of take a break here and let you jump in before I keep going. But that's how I eventually got to FreeUp.
Yeah. Well, let's roll into that, because I'm just paying attention here. So I want to hear about that transition from doing things more manually to then trying to automate and scale the process. Like, give me an idea. Then you started manually. Then you were saying, well, I want to invest in the software side to scale this thing up a little bit. What were maybe that's a good pause here. What were some of the indicators for you that, like, yeah, this is good. Like, we have enough traction here. We're investing in things like software and tech becomes worthwhile.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say this is a regret, because it all ended up working out. I mean, if there was one thing I could do differently, and hindsight's always 2020, it would be to kind of look at ourselves as a software company earlier. I mean, I had never run a software company. Connor never run a software company. At the beginning, for whatever reason, we were like, all right, we're a marketplace for freelancers. We'll match people up and have great support. And people love the VAs. They love the freelancers. They loved our support. Our protection. Hopefully people like working with me, but they hated our software. And that was just the constant feedback we got from everyone, clients, freelancers. And it probably took us a good year and a half before we were like, all right, we're a software company. We need to start acting like a software company. We need to hire developers. We need to have quality assurance people. We need to use Jira to manage the devs. We need to have sprints and testing and everything that goes along with that. And I wish we had done that a lot earlier, because once we started investing in the software, I feel like that's when it really came together. That's when people started taking us seriously. And I mean, it was tough because we're getting all this feedback, right? There's three parts of it. There's a freelancer side, there's a client side, and then there's the admin side with reports and data and stuff we need to run the business. And you're constantly getting all this feedback from clients, from freelancers, from our internal team saying, hey, we need X, Y, Z. And you end up with hundreds of pages of upgrades you need for your software. And then it comes down to prioritizing what has the potential for ROI. Or are you doing more on the client side, on the freelancer side, or the admin side? Are you doing long projects where everyone commits to that? Are you doing lots of short projects and chipping away, but pushing the longer things out for later? So I think that was always a balancing act. And I think the new owners are going to invest in that on a high level. I mean, I told them when they were buying FreeUp that even though by the time we had sold FreeUp 3 years later, we had invested a lot in our software and it came a long way. And it probably went from an F or a D to a B plus. There was a lot of potential there to make it even better. But my mindset from the beginning was, listen, we can't compete with Upwork on marketing. We can't compete with Upwork on software. We can compete with them on great VAs and customer service. So that was always my focus. And then once we started looking at ourselves as a software company, I feel like that's when it all came together.
When you say look at yourself like a software company, what were the besides, you could say the things you mentioned, which are good, but somebody might just think, oh yeah, it's like a hire developer. But it's probably more than that. There's probably a lot beneath the surface of what you're saying there. What were some of the things that changed for you guys when you started looking at yourself that way? And what were the things you started organizing differently?
Yeah. So let's say I wanted to really focus on customer service in my business. I can hire customer service reps, but that's just one part of it. You need good customer service systems. You need canned responses. You need meetings every week to keep them on track. And developers are no different. And it's even more extreme because not only do you need developers, but you need the quality assurance people to check their work. And you need good systems and processes because a developer will always say, hey, it'll take 2 weeks. And that ends up being 4, which ends up being 6. And you also have to map everything out. The communication between working with a business-minded person and a development-minded person is very, very different. And there's a lot of assumptions that business owners make that the developers won't. And you really have to try to close that communication gap while being realistic with your expectations, keeping everything in line. And then there's that prioritization where you need a good system with all this feedback to organize and say, hey, this project is coming next. And I will say that I'm fortunate enough that after a while, my business partner and I are very good at dividing and conquering and splitting up the business to our strengths. And he took over the dev team. So he was responsible for that, which was probably one of our better decisions because he works a lot better with developers than I do. But it's all about systems and processes and communication and figuring out how to get the most out of people while continuing to run forward and how much you're actually going to invest in software. Because we could put in $1 million into software and still have 10 million more to go. There's no real end in sight. You're constantly making these updates.
So specifically on that, where did you decide this is where we put our effort on the software side of things?
We had this one developer, Russell, who is actually part of our new venture outsource school too, but he started off part-time. He was working at Disney and he was doing this on the side. And so we moved him to full-time, and then we hired 2 other full-time developers that were in India to work with him. And then we hired a quality assurance person from the Philippines for 40 hours a week to just constantly be checking the software. And then we put Connor in charge of that team. So all that didn't happen overnight, but that was the eventual development of it.
So effectively finding kind of like a CTO, because you're kind of a non-technical co-founder, for lack of a better way to describe you. Is that correct?
Yeah. In terms of coding and write it like Node, which is what our software is built in, that's not my forte.
Did you have a partner with FreeUp? Did you mention that? I think.
Yeah, Connor, and he's not a developer either. Right. But I think he did enough research and enough talking with Russell to learn it, not to do the coding, but to understand it and to make business decisions based on it.
So then really what was, at least for you guys, because I know people like this who have a similar kind of setup, or the person who's listening might not be the technical side of the team, or might not have any technical side of the team, but knows maybe there's something there worth investing in and doing. But how complex and intimidating it could be if you're not a software person and you haven't worked with developers before. Sounds like one critical thing is maybe starting small, starting with one person or one developer and working with them to see if you can kind of build that trust. Because it sounded like underneath that, or underlying that, was, as you kind of did it over time, that was what was established. Trust that this guy could do the job, he could do it well, you could rely on him to some degree, or maybe to a great degree, and then expand it that way.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of reflections too. I mean, you have 3 developers, and sometimes they're all working on different projects. Sometimes 2 of them, or even all 3 of them, are working together. And you finish a push. Let's say you push this update, and then you reflect with them. Hey, this went really well. This went poorly. We didn't communicate on this. We had to redo this. And this is what made the deadline go forward. This is the changes that we're going to make. So I think after going through these different updates, 3 different people who all work a little bit differently, trying to get them to work better together, while also figuring out what systems and processes we can put in place to communicate better up front, or run meetings more effectively, to make sure that we're actually hitting these deadlines and continuing to move forward.
Yeah. And this decision on the move to software, was it all, I mean, it's also a financial decision. It's also an economic decision. There's more value in a company that's kind of more of a software company, right? But it sounds like did that play a part? And then maybe we can kind of move toward what you guys did. Obviously, this was one of the investments you made to get it, we'll say, sales ready.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's a lot that went into it. But maybe giving me kind of your overview and thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Connor and I run very lean businesses. We've started 3 businesses now with less than $5,000. And I mean, the day-to-day operations of FreeUp, there was no office, there's no US employees. It was all VAs in the Philippines doing customer service and billing and everything that goes with that. So hiring developers, you're not getting them at $5 an hour where they're the most expensive parts of the team. So part of it was figuring out, hey, do we hire 5 developers? Do we hire 1 or 2? And we kind of settled in that 3 and got them to work really well together, plus the QA person who was relatively inexpensive. So figuring out the exact amount that we wanted to reinvest there, because I mean, hiring developers and getting them onboarded and getting them integrated in the system is hard. It takes a while. And the last thing you want to do is hire 5 developers and then realize you can only afford 4 of them, and that's time wasted, or vice versa. Let's say I implement 3 of them and then I realize, crap, I should have had 5 of them. And then it takes you another 60 days to get the other 2 going. And who knows if the other 2 even work out. So you really want to make those decisions right the first time if possible.
Yeah, and that's why I was wondering about kind of if somebody's not technically, say, like as savvy, what their process would be for something like this, because it's like, how do you know who's going to be, a great developer going through that process? I know that it is such a big thing, we can't go into it here, but it sounds like, in terms of little like rules of thumb that I can take away from this, it's like at least some aspect of that was by starting a little bit small and then having somebody that you can kind of be the lead on that for advice. So you can kind of grow into it. You don't have to jump into a bunch of developers at once. So you guys made a strategic decision to do just that. But somebody could hypothetically start with something smaller.
Yeah, the tips that I would leave people with are do enough research so you understand that the pros and cons of different languages. There's lots of different coding languages. We picked Node, which for a lot of reasons that I'm not technically savvy enough to explain very well on a podcast. But we picked the language, and then we found one person, Russell. We started him part-time, and we built a lot of trust with him and had him learn as much of the business as possible. And once we built trust and saw that he could do it, only then can we build the team. Because if you don't know anything about dev and then you hire 3 developers from the start and they're all telling you different things, you don't know who's right and who's wrong. So you need that one point person who you're like, hey, what this person says goes, and you build that trust with them.
I love it. Okay. So, and how long, just also scope of time, what was the founding and then the sale of FreeUp? How long were you working on this project?
4 years.
This business. I won't call it a project, but I mean, I call everything projects, but that's awesome. So 4 years, you were able to go from basically a $5,000 investment to then sell it. You guys obviously really heavily invest in the software side of things. What else was kind of like critical to get it sales ready, or to make it something that somebody would want to buy? And then maybe we can kind of dive into that topic.
Yeah. So to put it in perspective, we grew from 5,000. We did $1 million in the first year, 5 million and 9 in the third, and 12 million in the fourth. And we grew it very organically. We spent almost no money on ads. And when people are buying a company, they want to see what the upside of it is. So the upside, I mentioned the software, there are still improvements there, but we didn't spend any money on ads. So everything that they done ads would just complement it on the organic side. And we had a very good organic where we had an affiliate program. One of the better decisions we ever made was from day one, if anyone you refer to FreeUp, you get 50 cents for every hour we build to them forever. And love that program. By year 4, we were paying out $250,000 a year in affiliate money, which is a lot of 50 cents. And from there, we would not only have it on our site and make it very clean, but we would tell every single person about it. So if I was on the phone call with the client, last thing I would always say is, hey, by the way, we have this affiliate program. When I trained VAs to eventually take phone calls, they had to remind every client at the end of every phone call about it. Same with partners. So affiliates is the baseline. The second thing I did is network with 3 new entrepreneurs every single day. I do that to this day, not selling them, not picking them, just getting to know them. And that leads to a lot of great relationships. And you look back 4 years later, 4 years in the future, your network has just grown exponentially. And a lot of people know about your business. They know what you do. Off of that, going on podcasts like this one was big. I've been on 300 plus podcasts. It's good to get in front of thousands of people. It's good to build relationships with hosts. You and I were talking before this. It's good for backlinks. It's good for SEO. It leads to clients, referrals, other partners. So that was a part of our organic plan. Putting out content, which anyone who follows me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram know that I put out content every day very consistently, very scheduled, very planned out. Off of that, looking for content partners. So this is really one of the biggest keys is look for people in your space that have the same customer base, but don't offer the same thing as you. So we started off going after Amazon sellers. So we went after Amazon software companies. We said, hey, you don't sell VA services. We don't sell Amazon software. let's do content swaps. Every 6 months, we'll organize it on our end. We'll reach out to you. You write a guest blog post for us, vice versa. You blast us to your list, we'll blast you to our list. We'll get to do a YouTube podcast together, whatever it is. And everything I'm mentioning kind of goes together. The networking could lead to affiliates. The networking could lead to podcasts. The podcast could lead to partnerships. And they all go hand in hand. And the last thing is micro-influencers. So reaching out to people that have groups, coaches that have students, have a following, whatever it is, and getting them to promote your products and showing them that you're going to take really good care of their customers and their clients and that you can add value in some way. So throughout the 4 years, we really built out tons of backlinks, tons of people that were promoting us without having us have to run ads, promoting us very consistently. And a lot of people are probably thinking, okay, that's great, but that makes you the face of the company. And then what happens if you sell it? And the only thing I heard for 4 years was like, why are you making yourself the face of FreeUp? You're never going to be able to sell this thing. And my counter argument to that, which ended up being right, was as the face of the company, I'm very replaceable. I mean, someone can always come in with a bigger marketing budget, a different lead generation strategy, put someone else in as a face. Like all that can be done with more money and a better plan, better than I can do it. The key is all the systems of the business, all the day-to-day operations, the customer service, the billing, the freelancer matching, every single part of that was systemized that ran with great SOPs and great VAs that ran without me. So I know that's what the buyers looked at when they were going through the sale, and we can talk about that more later. But making sure that everything had a system, everything that had a process that was followed, so they can come in and replace Connor and I with 4, 5, 6 people that marketed at a much higher level than we ever could. But all the stuff we did organically is still there. They still have the partners. They still have the backlinks. They still have all that content.
Yeah, so this is kind of, I think, super interesting to get into as well. And I think a lot of the comments you made, I don't think we need to go dive deep into them because I think I've covered them on other episodes and we've gone in depth on these kind of things like the lead generation, the affiliate strategies, the networking. So like all make a lot of sense to me. What I'd love to zoom in on is specifically on this, like where was it that you found, I don't know, maybe this was like during the process of selling or leading up to it, or maybe when you guys were like thinking about, hey, maybe now's the time, right? Because I mean, 4 years isn't a long time, but so you had to kind of move fast to do that. So, but where maybe you were taking a look at it and saying, okay, we need to increase margins here. We need to optimize this. Or you mentioned SOPs, systems, processes. Like, what were the big things that you had to invest in or put your concentration on to kind of like say smooth out for the sale? What were some of the things that came to mind?
Yeah, I think there's tons, but 2 things that I'll go into that are very important. We set up very good feedback loops early on, both for the clients and the freelancers, because we knew that just like the clients can go to Upwork and Fiverr and lots of other places, the freelancers have lots of different places that they can offer their services too. So we need to create a marketplace that they liked, and we need to show them that we listen to their feedback. So making sure that we're not only listening to their feedback, but making improvements based off the feedback, not just waking up one day and thinking that we know what people want, actually listening to them and hearing what they want. And then the second thing is, not only did we start creating SOPs early, but we gave ownership of those SOPs to the virtual assistant. So we had team leaders and assistant team leaders, and they were in charge of the SOPs for their team, and they were in charge of keeping them up to date. And just like every other startup, our processes were constantly changing, constantly evolving, whether it's ideas or feedback or just gradual improvements. And because they kept those SOPs up to date, I mean, we had 35 VAs. We had 7 or 8 teams. Connor and I didn't want to keep track of every SOP and figure out how to keep them all updated at all times. That's a little bit crazy. So by giving them ownership of those SOPs, when we finally went to sell and the new buyers are doing due diligence and they say, hey, how does your billing work? 5 minutes later, we say, hey, here's a 50-page SOP that lays out everything, who's doing what, exactly what happens. And it's been updated every few months for the past 4 years. And stuff like that, I feel like is incredibly important.
Awesome. So having the SOPs, and when you talk about SOP, I know that can probably mean a different thing to different people. So standard operating procedure, how much of this is like, how it sounds like you went really in depth and you to the point where like an SOP I've seen can be, some people's are more generalized, others are way more in depth and kind of cover like, you know, checklists and processes like that. Are you more on the latter side, like really in depth?
It's funny. And I actually don't recommend doing this for people who have never hired a VA before, but I feel like Connor and I have gotten good enough at hiring VAs where we can get the SOP started and then hire really good VAs that get it.
Yeah, and then roll
Let's say
with it.
that I get it to 60%, they can get it to that 100%. And I think people that are doing it for the first time might run into issues doing that, but that's what we were able to do. We kept all of our SOPs in text, Google Docs that could be updated.
Yep.
They didn't start off 50 pages. They started off very small and then got better. One of the reasons that we don't use video or didn't use video is because you're changing stuff so much. It just leads to a lot of re-recording and a lot of trying to edit stuff, which is actually why we're launching an SOP software to kind of solve that problem where imagine a loom that you're recording, but you can right click every time you get to the next step. So when you're done, it's logged all the steps. And if you need to replace step 3, you can just replace step 3 without hiring a video editor or redoing the whole thing. And you can add text and give VAs access, remove access, edit access, whatever you want. And we want to build that to really make SOPs a lot more dynamic and easier, because that's where I feel like a lot of people struggle, either not wanting to make documents or not making good videos, or they make the videos and then the videos get outdated and they have to refilm them all. And then that just doesn't get done.
Yeah, and I always appreciate the written plus images best on those kind of things. Small preference, but same deal, and kind of struggling or not really struggling. We're doing just fine with it, but find that that's a point of like improvement right now in some of the things that we're working on. And it's like, okay, how do we like clean it up, get this done? So this idea of like SOPs and playbooks for specific things, and then expanding out from there. And I love how you kind of put the burden or the responsibility on the person who will be executing as well. I think a lot of people don't think to do that, but I try to do that as quick as possible. Once I have like the rough draft done of like the process that I want, I like to hand that off as quickly as possible. I don't know if you have any other comments on that. I guess besides that, I'd like to maybe zoom in on then, were there any points where when you were looking at this and getting things prepped and ready, where you were like, oh no, we have a lot of like resources over here or invested here, and we need to cut them down and reinvest over here, or anything like that structurally that you had to change up to get the business sales ready?
We didn't change much from the time. So what ended up happening was one of our clients, actually the Hoth, reached out to us and they said, hey, we've been using FreeUp for a year. We want to get into the VA freelancer space. We don't want to build it from scratch. Would you guys be interested in being acquired? And I think it's not like we were like, oh my God, we can sell the business now. We just started like changing and optimizing stuff. We already had that stuff optimized, which is why they wanted to sell it. Now, I think part of it, as we were going through it, ended up being a 5-6 month process, was staying focused on growing FreeUp and expanding in the projects that we were working on. Because the last thing we wanted to do was have the deal fall through because nothing's signed. They could back out at the last minute. And then we haven't been focusing on what we should be focusing on, growing the business, for the past 5 months. And then we don't really have a great business to go back to. So once we started getting the outreach from them, the due diligence questions, and we just started doing a lot of due diligence on them too, it was much more about staying focused and continuing the course. I would say that we didn't take on like new projects. We didn't launch anything new, but we had so many projects in the pipeline that we were already working on that we just continued to carry on with them.
Right. And then for you guys, and I've heard this before, and I've had some conversations about it, where people shift in particular to, well, we won't say shift, but maybe like, well, we could say shift or pivot or realign to more of a software focused enterprise. And the nature of your sale in that context is different, like kind of how that came about, like kind of organically. And I'm sure that will be the case for a lot of people. But I have read and talked to some people about how software makes for a better multiple on the sale. I mean, are these things that people should be keeping in mind now, like as they're growing and building, in terms of like things like that? Like, okay, if I'm building this and growing it to maybe eventually sell, I want to keep in mind, well, what's going to be the most lucrative asset that I could sell? And I know some of that was on the systems and processes, on the kind of like relentless marketing that you were doing, and through the networking and partnerships and all that stuff. But on that side of things, what are your thoughts or advice from that perspective?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think it's building the systems consistently overall, and not having anything in your head and making it, okay, every new thing that we try out, everything we do becomes a system that within 90 days I'm delegating to someone else and I have that process in place and they take ownership of it. And second, from the marketing side, you need people to be coming to you consistently without you having to necessarily do something. If you're doing all these Facebook lives and you're promoting and people are coming, and then you stop doing that for 3 weeks and your website traffic plummeted, that's obviously a very bad sign for someone buying. So obviously I can't speak for exactly what they were looking for, but I mean, with FreeUp, we had all these partners promoting us. We had all these podcasts that are evergreen. We had content that was out there with blog articles and SEO. The website was good in SEO, and micro influencers just constantly promoting us. And so we would get all this traffic, very diversified. It wasn't all coming from one specific place consistently to our site. And that's something that I feel like any buyer is going to look for. If the only way that you're getting leads is by going to conferences and talking to people and you're really good at closing deals, that's tough for someone to come in and replicate it and take to the next level.
Right. I love it. And so any other, I guess, words of wisdom or bits of advice on somebody who's like kind of building a business, getting ready to sell, and going through the sales process, or anything else that you found maybe remarkable about or worth remarking on through your process on this idea of like selling a business and maybe even kind of transitioning on to like what came next? Any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, our biggest thing was we wanted to sell it to the right people. We didn't care how much money they offered us. I mean, obviously money is a factor, but my point is if someone offered us a lot of money and we didn't feel like they were the right person to take FreeUp to the next level and take care of the relationships and the partnerships that we had built and take care of our internal team and the freelancers on the platform and people that we really care about, we weren't making any deals. So we did a ton of due diligence on them. We got to visit their office, so like an hour and a half from me. They treat people really, very well. They've won Employer of the Year for a bunch of years. They've bought other businesses. They've scaled business bigger than us. We learned what their vision was for FreeUp. We really liked it. And we took care of our internal team. Our internal team was everything. We couldn't have done it without them. They were billing us thousands of hours every week. So not only did we make sure that their job was secure and that the bonuses and raises and the programs that we put into place were still going to be there, and we weren't signing anything without making sure it was. We took $500,000 from the sale and gave it to our team in the Philippines to make sure they were taken care of as a thank you. And not only that, but when we sold the business, and I think at that point you're kind of crossing your fingers and hoping that they weren't BSing you, right? And have some different plan or whatever it is. We checked in with our internal team and we continue to check in with them. And we actually have a great relationship with the new owners. We're partnered. FreeUp is partnered with my new venture outsource school. And I mean, they've reached out to us for just questions and help and nothing crazy, but I mean, we want to support them. We want them to be successful. We want it to be a win for everyone. And we only want to sell the business if it was going to be a win-win-win. And I feel like that doesn't get talked about enough. A lot of people, they're either scared to sell their baby or they just want that money, that payout. But there's another factor that you want to sell it to the right person. And you also don't want to sell it to someone you can't trust who, yeah, you might have these legal agreements, but you don't want someone to like sue you or go in front of an arbitrator or go back on their word. Like you want to sell it to good, honest business people that you will have a relationship with hopefully going forward. And I mean, who knows? Like assuming everything goes well, maybe I sell them my next business, and that's not the plan, but you never know when you're going to do business with someone again. You don't want to burn some bridge or pull a fast one on someone. It's got to be that win-win-win for everyone.
Yeah, and that does bring up a good point. And it's also kind of this thing like, well, once you sell, then what? And I mean, you've also had other things going on in the background that I know we didn't really dive into here. But and then you transition to a new business or businesses immediately. I mean, you mentioned the software company, and I know you have outsourced school. But tell me a little bit about that. Maybe also in that transition period where whether it's about finding the right person to sell it to, but specifically how you were able to kind of move into this next path for you, like, and where did that come about? Maybe we can dive into that a little bit, and how do you organize from the sale of this thing that you just invested so much in, right? Time and energy and all that, to then going into a new project like right away. Tell me a little bit about what that was like for you.
Yeah. So we sign on the dotted line. We get them access to everything. There's a 90-day transition period. So we want to set them up to be successful. We're helping them. We're training them. The first 2 weeks, it's like a normal work week. It's 40, 50 hours a week. After 2 weeks, they're starting to get it. They don't really need us for 40 hours. We're there to help. Our hours start slowing down as we get close to the 90 days. And Connor, my business partner, and I, first of all, we have a conversation. Hey, do we want to keep working together? Because who knows? We could have driven each other crazy over the past 4 years, and we made money together, and let's move on, and that would have been fine. But fortunate enough, we both enjoyed working with each other, and we want to do something together. And then it became, what do we want to do? Do we want to stay in the same space, the VA space? Do we want to go into real estate? Do we want to just take on something different? And people started to reach out to us, asking us, hey, can you teach us how to use VAs better, because I had gone on podcasts and written blog articles and stuff like that, but we never went step by step. This is exactly how we did it. And one person in particular, Nate McAllister, who has a lot of experience in the affiliate and course space, he said that, hey, like I'd love to work on a next project with you of building out a course on VAs. And so we ended up creating this course. And I think Connor and I, we're not big course people. We were a little bit skeptical. We wanted to make it very high value. And our whole mentality was, hey, we're going to put everything we can into this course. We're going to spend 60 days making it really good. We're going to sell it. If people like it, great, we'll keep going. If people don't like it, we're just going to refund people. We're not really interested in stealing people's money. We want to make a good course that people actually like. So we launched Cracking the VA Code, which goes in depth into our interview, onboarding, training, and managing process. And I think anytime you start a new business, you have no idea what people's feedback is going to be. Luckily, people really liked it and they wanted more. So we started coming up with these different mini courses of how to hire VAs to go on podcasts, called the Podcast Outreach Formula. These are all things that I really do, that I hire VAs for. How to hire VAs for lead generation, how to hire VAs for bookkeeping. My first hire at FreeUp was an awesome bookkeeper, and the process there. So as we're launching these mini courses, we kind of, like any business, the idea kind of evolves. So we made it so, hey, you can buy these mini courses if you want. If you just want a course on how to use VAs to get on podcasts, go for it. But if you buy our main course, Cracking the VA Code, we're going to give you a year-long membership to Outsource School, and you get every other course that we come out with the next year, and we plan on continuing to bring them, to bust them out, access to all of those, plus support, plus be a part of our community that we're building. And then in addition to that, I'm sure there's lots of things that I know there are a lot of things that I don't know how to use VAs for or hire VAs for. And so we're going to bring in other experts that do to teach courses as part of the membership and different workshops there. So that's the idea behind Outsource School and the membership that we're building there. And we'd love to help anyone that hasn't been able to conquer the ability to hire and really use VAs like we have. And on the flip side of it, the same developer who built the software, Russell, who was part of the buyout, is working on this SOP building software that I talked about. It's all one business. It's all under Outsource School. And we don't have a name for that yet, but that'll be out in the next 30 days. We'll be looking for beta testers. Anyone that wants to be a beta tester, just join our newsletter. We're going to give everyone free access to it. And then the idea there is, if people like that software, which hopefully they do, we'll build out a VA toolbox of different VA softwares that complement the education and hopefully cure some of the bottlenecks that people have with VA. So that's the plan. We're 90 days in, and just like any business, I'm sure it's going to continue to evolve.
At this point in time, too, would you say things are about the same level of busyness for you? Same engagement, same, you just sold a business, you're moving on to the next thing. Are you running a gun in the same amount? Like, I guess, like lifestyle wise, what's new or different, or what's the same?
No, my lifestyle is dramatically different. I think FreeUp was a lot more 24/7. I was kind of the face of that. Although I guess on the face of Outsource School, we plan on toning that down a little bit. I was probably working, 10 to 11 hours a day for the past 4 years, obviously like time off and weekends and all that. But here, I'm very much like 7 to 3. I'm still working hard. I still have high energy. I kind of paced it out. A perfect example of this is last year, there was a week where I did 5 podcasts a day for 5 days in a row. So 25 podcasts in a week, which was totally crazy. And that was a terrible week. But now I have it where I don't do more than 1 podcast a day. And I have a VA who's in charge of that. And I'm booked out until June. And just really making sure that, hey, I have that work-life balance. Now, the other aspect of that is COVID. I had all these travel plans, and now I have thousands of dollars of airline credit. So some stuff changes. I didn't plan on selling my business and being locked in my house for the next 6 months. So we'll see how that plays out. But my lifestyle is definitely a lot calmer, although we continue to work hard and build this new company.
That's awesome, man. Well, good for you. Good story. Love it. Love seeing people who've earned success, get it. And we appreciate you kind of going behind the scenes and giving us a snapshot of that and a look inside. So, again, I'm just going to iterate to everyone, check out outsourceschool.com. That'll definitely be in the show notes. We'll also link to FreeUp so people can take a look at that. But check out outsourceschool.com. And then Nathan, thank you so much for being on In the Trenches, man. This was a real pleasure.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for having me. Anyone listening, I'm very easy to contact. I love networking with other entrepreneurs. Feel free to connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn, Nathan Hirsch, Instagram, Twitter, Real Nate Hirsch. Even if I can help you with stuff that has nothing to do with VAs, happy to do it. Check out FreeUp. I'm now a client of FreeUp. I'm a big believer in them. I love them. I support them however I can. And Outsource School, we're excited about it. And if anyone has questions on that or wants to be part of our community, we'd love to have you.
Part of your deal should have been free FreeUp forever.
we negotiated a good deal for that. I won't say what it is, but
That's awesome. Good stuff, man. Well, thank you, Nathan. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up another broadcast of In the Trenches. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating review. Just go to tommorkes.com/iTunes, and that'll take you to iTunes where you can leave a 5-star rating review. And that really helps spread the word about this podcast. And finally, if you need help growing your online business or generating new traffic, leads, and sales at a profit, reach out to me at tom@tommorkes.com or head over to the website tommorkes.com and sign up for the free newsletter.